My Journey on the Titanic, a Survivor's Account. My name is Margaret Turner. I was 24 years old when I boarded the RMS Titanic on April 10, 1912. I was traveling second class bound for New York City to join my brother and his wife who had settled in Brooklyn. I remember the excitement in the air at Southampton, people bustling, trunks being loaded, and the sheer awe on every face as they looked upon that gleaming ship. The Titanic was unlike anything I'd ever seen. She was a floating palace. My cabin was comfortable and modern, running water, electric lights, and even a writing desk. It was more than I'd expected, far more than I was used to. That first day we explored the ship. I stood on deck watching the shoreline disappear, with a strange mixture of fear and freedom in my chest. The days aboard were like a dream. I took my meals in the second-class dining saloon, white tablecloths, fine food, and friendly company. I became acquainted with a young Irish schoolteacher named Nora Brennan, who was also heading to America for a new life. We spent hours walking the deck, sipping tea, and watching the waves churn behind the ship. There was a sense of invincibility aboard. Everyone said she was unsinkable. The crew, the passengers, even the posters said so. We had no reason to doubt it. On Sunday, April 14th, the sea was calm, eerily so. The air was bitter cold that evening, and I remember Nora saying it felt like we were sailing through glass. That night, I retired to my cabin early, planning to write a letter home. I had just begun when I felt a strange jolt, not violent but noticeable. The engine stopped not long after. At first, I thought little of it. People in the corridors were murmuring, speculating. I slipped on my coat and went out to see what was happening. A steward assured us it was nothing serious, just a precaution. But soon we were told to put on life jackets and come on deck. That's when fear began to set in. The stars were blindingly clear above us. The air cut like knives. I clutched Nora's hand as we stood waiting. There was still no panic, not yet. The crew kept their voices calm, directing women and children into lifeboats. I didn't want to go without knowing what was really happening, but a sailor said sharply, "This is not a drill. Get in." Nora and I were separated at the boat. She was pushed back in the crowd, and I was lifted over the side into Lifeboat 6. I shouted her name, but my voice was swallowed by the night. The boat began to lower. I never saw her again. We drifted in silence, the cold penetrating to the bone. Some women sobbed quietly. Others sat in stunned silence, staring back at the ship. And then, we saw her lights flicker. The sinking of the Titanic is something I can barely put into words. One moment she was magnificent, defiant. The next, she broke in two, her bow slipping beneath, and then the stern stood upright, black against the starlit sky, before it plunged down with a roar that shook the sea. Then silence, a deadly empty silence. Then came the cries. Hundreds of voices screaming from the freezing water. It was the worst sound I have ever heard. Some begged, some screamed names. A few boats rowed back, ours did not. A woman in our boat, Margaret Brown, I learned later, pleaded with the crew to turn back, but they refused. "They'll swamp us," they said. We waited, drifting until the cries faded. The dawn came slowly. My fingers were stiff, my lips cracked. And then someone spotted a plume of smoke. It was the RMS Carpathia. I cried when I saw her. We were pulled aboard around 8 a.m. I collapsed on the deck, too cold to speak. They wrapped me in blankets and gave us tea, but many of us just stared, hollow-eyed toward the north where the Titanic had gone down. On board the Carpathia, we were taken care of as best as possible. I found others from second class and even some third-class passengers, those who had beaten impossible odds. We spoke in whispers, sharing names, asking after friends. Few had good news. We arrived in New York on April 18th. I remember the sight of the Statue of Liberty in the mist and the thousands waiting at the dock, some weeping, others silent. I had no one waiting for me, but a kind woman from the relief committee gave me shelter, warm food, and helped me contact my brother. I never saw Nora again. Her name was on the list of the missing. I kept her rosary, which she had given me in the lifeboat, for luck. I don't speak often of what happened, but I write it now so others may remember, not just the tragedy, but the people. The ship was grand, yes, but it's the faces I remember, the kindness, the bravery, the terrible choices no one should ever have to make. I survived the Titanic, but a part of me stayed in those cold Atlantic waters with Nora and with all the others who never came home.